Hello, folks. I suppose I technically don't need these. I don't, because I'm not. I can't hear yous, but can yous hear me? I suppose we can keep this on my lap, though. How are we all doing? Ah, there we go. I was like, why can't I see the chat? I can now see the chat. Hello there. Oh, cool. We have loads of people today. Oh, Spencer O'Dowd speaking the Gaeilge. Giadlich, Gias Morodlich. Kajimra Tato. Although actually it's a close tattoo in the accent that I was doing there. Kajimra Tato. Be good old Donegal Irish. How are we all doing? Let's see. Might fire a bit more light on. Might look better. Or will it look overexposed? Yeah. Let's see. It'll be fine. Yeah, that looks fine. Looks fine. So how are we doing? Finally back doing the live streams. It has been a while, partially because, as some of you who may have been keeping track through my little tidbits in various social media platforms, that we moved house, and so it's been a very intense experience because the house itself, the bottom half of it, is over 100 years old, old stone walls, and we've needed to completely strip the whole thing out and rebuild it from the inside out and sort of from the outside in. So it's going to be amazing when it's finished, though. But where we are now, again, some of you may recognize from some of the John Talk videos, is here we are in my office, my new office, which is super exciting. And you can see some of my posters behind you. What I can show you, actually, because I can pick up my webcam, I can show you a little bit more of the ceiling. I decorated the ceiling with a lot of posters, a lot of posters. The rest are kind of blocked there by, but you'll just have to see the rest as time goes by. But yeah, so it's super exciting. But yes, and I've also got TARDIS behind me as well. It's not finished yet. All you purists out there will be like, but it doesn't have the pieces of wood along the windows. I'll get there. So here we are. So let's have a look at any other updates. No. Oh yeah, update on for anyone who didn't catch. For some of you who watched my most recent John Talks there about the Electoral College, I had an update at the start saying that my laptop died. I am currently now talking to you not from my laptop, but that laptop which I've been using for the last 6 years. So it's probably due a time to die a little bit. But I'm now in a much better machine. But thankfully, shout out to KM Computers of Ramelton, County Donegal. They were able to recover the data. Now, I haven't seen it yet. It's not on my hard drive yet, but I sifted through it yesterday remotely and picked out all of the files which I wanted to recover. So fingers crossed, it's all looking very positive, which means that I don't have to redraw the first 20 minutes, the first 20% of the of the Civil Rights Part 2 video, because that was a prospect that I was not looking forward to. I mean, yeah, because I've been very proud of the work so far. There's been a lot of hard work. This is a very, very difficult video for a lot of reasons. Partially, it's very heavy. So much so I am actually going to have a content warning at the start of it. In hindsight, I I realize now, the more I make these videos, the more that I do, and the more kind of, for want of a better term, socially aware that I get, I realize that I probably should have put some like content warnings on some of my previous videos, because they do go to dark places. But this one in particular is going to have a content warning for racial violence, because there's a lot to it, and yeah, but it's going to be really good. I hope, and it's going to be. I'd say by the end of it, it's probably going to end up being about 20 minutes long. It's going to be a 20-minute video, which means a lot of illustrations. But it's a story that needs telling. I mean, it has been told before, and it will be told again. But this is just my take on it, and at me as a YouTube historian. That's what I like to do: take stories from history and tell them, and hopefully bring them to an audience, some people who are familiar with the story and some people who are not. It's an amazing story. I'm not sure if I will be able to. There's one bit in particular when I'm recording it, or anytime I read it, it makes me cry. And this isn't me bigging up my own writing. It has nothing to do with my writing. It's the reality of it, and it's some of the things that Martin Luther King spoke about the night before he was killed at a speech, the classic I have been to the mountaintop, and it's so sad. I'm gonna cry now, because this was a man who had a target on his head at that point well over 10 years and longer. And he figured that, given the amount of people, of leaders who had been killed up until that point, he knew that it was probably only a matter of time. But that speech, he essentially says, look, we're all on this journey, and I'm probably not going to make it there with you. It's really sad. So yeah, so we'll get there. I have not been to the mountaintop yet. That's still a ways away. Like where I was in my illustrations before my laptop decided to die was it 1957? No, I made it to 1960. I was at the Greensboro sit-ins, which interestingly enough, I was telling my dad about these, and he was like, "Oh, Greensboro." I was there because he used to work for a company like here in Ireland, but they were actually based in North Carolina, Unify. They used to have a big factory here in Letterkenny, and years ago, like in the early 90s, he was in Greensboro. And and I was telling him, oh, well, in Greensboro, there was a huge protest where a lot of black students went in and sat in the diner in Woolworths. And he was like, oh my God, I've been in that Woolworths, which I was like, no way. Yeah. So like when he was over there, they went to downtown Greensboro, and he was in that Woolworths. Little did he know a massive event in American history happened there. And of course, he was telling a load of the Americans who he was working with, and they were shocked that these two white guys from Ireland went to downtown Greensboro, because I mean at that point, all of the white people had moved out to the suburbs and were using the malls out in the suburbs, and it was only the black people who were using the city center at that point. Hashtag urban, all of that stuff. Yay, history and what's the word I'm looking for? Sociology. It's quite fascinating. But yeah, so the bizarre links that we have with history. Let's have a look at the comments and see how we're doing. My mother actually attended Martin Luther King's funeral. Wow. Wow. That would have what's that 60, 68. Nearly 1/3 of Irish people who moved to Scotland went into my home city, Glasgow, including my great grandparents. Well, yeah. Glasgow is a particularly Irish area of Scotland. Glasgow's a great city. I've been there a few times. I would consider my no, it's not my, it'd be ma. I consider my Glaswegian accent to be pretty good. I can't do it now with I've got these clear liners, hashtag smile life, that I have been straightening my teeth for the last couple of months, and they're really good. But now that I'm trying to do a Glasgow accent, it's actually really hard because there's loads of tongue work in right at the back of the teeth that I'm having to relearn how to do. Of course, I'll be taking these out in a while. But yeah, big it up, Glasgow. Right, how are we doing now? Boston as well. I missed. One day, can you do Irish emergency video? Yeah, I'd love to do that sometime. I would imagine that will probably be a slightly shorter one. For anyone who doesn't know, the emergency in Ireland was the seriously underplayed name that they gave to World War II. So, because Ireland remained neutral during World War II, they called it the emergency. It's like up in the north, this brutal war of kind of terrorism and whatnot was like called the Troubles, in the same way World War II in Ireland was called the emergency. So that's fun. But yeah, no, that would be an interesting aspect of Irish history to explore, because it's something that, I mean, in hindsight's always 2020. It's 2021 now. Ooh. But hindsight's always 2020, and you do look back at it and go, Ireland, you dropped the ball there. You didn't go and fight the Nazis. But at the same time, you look at the historical context. Ireland was only a fledgling nation right out in the edge of Europe, and only having been through a very brutal war with Britain and a very long 700 years of control with Britain. And, at face value, like comparing, World War I, how the Irish were brought into that imperialistic war because of, by the way, hold on, I better read this before it disappears. Wildcard Immoral, thank you very much for the super chat. Do you think you would do John Talks about the US backlash against trans rights and trans lives? Oh, very interesting. Right, I'll finish my point on the emergency. Yeah, Ireland had just finished fighting with Britain and kind of didn't want to get dragged into another war by proxy. So you can kind of understand why they stayed out of it. John talks about US backlash against trans rights and trans lives. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to write that down. I'm always looking for ideas for John Talks, and that is one of them. John Talks US, but I'm not sure if I would keep it specifically at US backlash. I might even kind of keep it a bit broader, kind of Western backlash, because there's a lot of backlash in the UK as well that we might be able to explore. US backlash of trans rights, yeah, because that is something that has been really, really interesting to watch. I mean, I say this from a position of not having personal skin in the game, so yes, it's been very interesting. It's been very distressing to watch. Like that's my privilege talking there. Oh yes, it's been quite fascinating. No, it's terrible. it's actually terrible, and it's so frustrating where you see things making leaps and bounds. You see people, you see ideas making leaps and bounds and acceptance. And yet, at the same time, you've just got this backlash. But that happens so many times throughout history of gains are made with one idea and other people are like, no, we don't like that idea, and push against it. As history has shown, though, for all of the backlash, and as violent as the backlash can be on occasion, hopefully it's a generally forward momentum and forward trajectory. But yeah, no, that's definitely something I would like to I'd be interested in talking about more in a John Talks. What do you think about the John Talks, by the way? I know I've just done 2 of them now, but it's something, obviously it's a bit more opinion based. And as some people don't like my opinions coming out in my history videos, but it's like, the way that I look at it, where people are, I spotted him being biased there. And I'm like, I trust my audience to be able to discern that. I'm not trying to trick you. And I think some people can be so vigilant, which is a good thing, which is absolutely a good thing, to be vigilant about the media that you consume and to be vigilant of spotting biases. But as long as you can spot that, and as long as you can deal with that, that's okay. And like, you can tell whenever I talk, even in my, and I do this on purpose so that you do know when it's my opinion, because because usually I'll have this tone of voice and I'm explaining this, and this. Of course, then I'll kind of get slightly more sarcastic in my tone of voice. I trust my audience to pick up on my biases in there. That's they are always going to be there with anybody. I do aim to be as neutral as I can, but at the same time, there's only kind of so much neutral that you can be towards certain issues. It's like, if I were doing I do plan on doing a Rise of Nazis in Germany video and exploring the 1920s and 1930s in Germany. I'm not going to be sitting there going, am I going to be biased, or am I going to be neutral and explore where the Nazis were coming from? It's like, well, yeah, I am going to explore where the Nazis are coming from, and explore it in the way of, this is where that line of thinking leads, and using that to apply it to modern political stances, and kind of going, yeah, we know where that goes. We know where that line of thought leads. This group is better than that group. That basic principle, if brought to its extreme, will always result. I mean, that's a broad statement in itself, and I trust you to spot that. But, when brought to its extreme, one group being better than the other, it'll either lead to subjugation or extermination, in some shape or form. And it'll lead to subjugation until they're no longer needed, and then they're a waste of space as far as the superior group deems it. So yeah, that's something to look out for. Let us have a look. How about a John Talk about your life during the pandemic? Oh, that's an interesting one. I'm going to write that down. I have a list here. The pandemic. My life during the pandemic. My life during the pandemic hasn't really been all that exciting, except for the fact that I got a dog, which is great. He's a lot of fun. He's currently sleeping on a bed over there. But some of you may have seen him in previous live streams. But yeah, my life during the pandemic has been relatively uneventful. Well, relatively uneventful. I moved house. I bought a house. I didn't just move house. I bought a house, and I completely renovated. That's sorry, I take that back. My life during the pandemic has actually been very productive. But that's the thing, sometimes you just completely take for granted the things, and sometimes you just completely overlook the really positive things in your life, and just kind of, it's so easy to focus on the negative sometimes, because I think of life during the pandemic, and I think about how I was booked. Myself and Louise Conahan were booked to go to the Milwaukee Irish Festival and perform Manny Man Does the History of Ireland on stage in Milwaukee. And I was like, right, this is the next stage in developing that play and bringing it to a bigger audience and all of that. And it just stalled. And so I did my first convention in 2019. In WorldCon in Dublin, and that was amazing. So much so that I was like, in 2020, I am going to do more conventions. And then 2020 happened. I have a place booked with Dublin Comic Con, which it was supposed to be for spring 2020, and then that got postponed because they were like, "Hey, the pandemic's happened, so we're gonna postpone it till summer of 2020," and then the pandemic continued and continued. So it'll probably be next year, but still, we shall see. But yeah, I definitely am looking forward to doing more conventions and getting out and meeting people and selling some merchandise. But yeah, because I had such a wonderful experience at WorldCon, because it was a lovely kind of combination of people who weren't familiar with my work, and I was able to tell them, and they're like, "Oh, this is really cool," and so off they went and found more stuff. And then it was also really cool meeting people from all over the world who did know my work, and they're like, "Oh my God, are you the guy who does this?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's me," which was bizarre. It was just so funny that I mean, obviously, I am talking to you all across the world here, but still, it's another thing again, meeting those people in person and just realizing this is strange. You know my stuff, you know my work, it's a lovely feeling, as long as you're not weird about it. Nobody was weird about it. It was cool. John talks about how the Turkish government is still denying the Armenian Genocide. I mean, I can put it on the list. It's going to become a very, very long list very quickly, but that is certainly an important issue. Although I mean, obviously this isn't the Turkish government, but there was something big there about, I think, Joe Biden acknowledging the Armenian Genocide. I think there was something to that effect, and it was kind of a big official recognition of the United States going, yeah, that was a thing that happened. For anyone who doesn't know, it was during World War One, that while the kind of Ottoman Empire was crumbling, a lot of the Armenian population of what is now kind of modern day Turkey, they were essentially driven into the desert, right, off you go walk, and they, millions. Millions. I don't know the figures off the top of my head, but I think it was the figure 1.8 million is coming to mind. I may be completely off there. I'm good with dates, terrible with figures, but yeah. Let's see. Daniel Colvin is asking, what's your best project, you think? I am very pleased with that most recent US president's video. That was a lot of work. It ended up being a lot more work than I anticipated, because I figured, I was going to be reusing a lot of old artwork from the original kind of part 1, 2, and 3. But the more that I started writing it, and the more it was funny, because when I went about writing that script, it was because I wanted to kind of take out some of my biases a little bit from the first couple of videos, that there were certain things I didn't mention, certain things I felt that I should have mentioned, and because like I very much kind of glazed over a lot of where the Office of Presidency came from. So I ended up kind of adding a lot more detail with the founding fathers. Spencer O'Dowd, thank you very much. John talks maybe about the relationship between the Irish in Ireland and the Irish in diaspora, and opinions on denying the cultural heritage of the diaspora despite them being forced to leave Ireland. Oh, That's a great topic. Ireland and the Irish diaspora. That was actually one that I that was one that I did think, that I have been thinking of, particularly. I'll come back to that. I'll just finish off kind of what I was saying about the U.S. president's one. Yeah, a lot of people then pointed out, how so much more bias that I got in. I'm not sure, did I talk about this in the last live stream? Probably. Who's to know? That the last live stream was so long ago. But yeah, the something. Yeah, so many people pointed out that, this USA or United States President Part 3 was good up until it goes beyond Richard Nixon, and then he gets super biased. And I mean, it was partially true. It could have been a lot more, but yeah, I did revisit that very much, and I wanted to add a little bit more positivity around Ronald Reagan. Not much though, because I really don't like Ronald Reagan, but I wanted to kind of pay lip service, but still going, look, yeah, I mean, there were certain positivities that maybe people felt at the time that he was doing a good job, but ultimately a lot of the problems that we're seeing now stem back to Reaganism and Ronald Reagan. So, but yeah, in my USA Presidents Part 3 video, I definitely let Bill Clinton off several hooks. I mean, I mentioned the Lewinsky scandal, but if you go back and you compare the two sections, my language changed, where I'm pointing out that, he used his position of power to, become involved with Monica Lewinsky, and intern. She was like, what, 21, 22? Like, and the sad thing is that she was the one that ended up becoming the punchline of so many jokes, and continues to be so. Although I think a lot of people are kind of coming to the realization, wait a minute, maybe she was the victim here a little bit. So wildcard immoral. Thanks, Ronald. Really helped with AIDS and racism. Yeah. That was. Thank you, Wildcard Immoral, for the super chat there as well. Absolutely. Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, the fact that I think he didn't publicly say the term AIDS until like 1987, and it's just, it's very upsetting, because just that attitude, that this idea of this plague that was only affecting the gays or the drug addicts, and it was this judgment from God and all of this kind of stuff. It's just, that's the side of conservatism that really, really annoys me, is using religion to justify something, and using religion as an excuse, and kind of go, oh, look, there we go. That's clearly God doing that, therefore we don't have to intervene. But yeah, the amount of people that were infected, the amount of people that were allowed to die because there was little to no research done, because why bother? It was killing the undesirables, as it was seen by the higher ups. So for that alone is a full-on indictment against Ronald Reagan in my books, regardless of all of the economic rubbish. Yeah. yeah, his handling of the AIDS pandemic was pandemic was woeful. Let's see. Ali 13191 strikes back. A wonderful name. Thank you very much for the super chat. Let's see. What about John talks about the history and influence of the GAA? Oh, the guy will get talking about the guy now. History and influence of the GAA. Yeah. Influence of the GAA. The Gaelic Athletic Association. For anyone who doesn't know, that is the organisation in Ireland that run the kind of the Gaelic Irish sports. So Gaelic football, hurling, which is kind of like hockey, but so much faster and more intense, and handball as well, and camogie. But yeah. That would be a great one. But to go back to Mr. O'Dowd, Spencer was asking in his very kind super chat, Ireland and the Irish diaspora. That would be a very interesting one to explore, because it is something. It is something that I that I have a personal connection with, as well. In that I have many family members, like distant cousins. Well, actually, immediate cousins and distant cousins. Like I literally have first cousins who moved to the United States and have been living there, for some of them for nearly 30 years, and that connection. But yeah, and then like the kind of second and third and fourth generation of Irish, and it's so fascinating because that all of those different people, their kind of political leanings are so diverse. But I always find it very difficult when the Irish diaspora can be taken in by anti-immigrant sentiment. I do get it in a lot of ways, where this is why I decided to do John Talks, because I can actually script it and edit it, and rather than but yeah, it frustrates me whenever I see Irish Americans getting very anti immigrant, and they'll be like, oh well, we're talking about refugees coming from like war torn countries, or come, and it's like where do you think all the Irish came from in the 1840s? Why was there this sudden influx of Irish immigrants in America? And that was the woeful hardships of the famine, and then just waves and waves and waves of like that. That has been a long tradition in Ireland now, of when things get tough in Ireland, there's just this wave of emigration, wave of emigration. Ireland only really properly saw a bigger influx of immigration from the 2000s, when our economy started doing better, and it was great to see, because it's really kind of diversified Ireland in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's very frustrating. But I mean, the people back in the 1840s, like you look at the riots that happened during the American Civil War in New York, and that was a lot of Irish who were essentially complaining that all of these freed slaves were coming and taking our jobs, and so it's just that it's that classic class warfare of let them fight, let the working class kill each other, and not realize that it's the people on top that are screwing you, and that just that happens time again, and just that constant thing of stepping on the face of the person below you to get onto that ladder and pulling the ladder up after you get on. I really hate that. It really, really frustrates me. It's just so selfish and it's so hypocritical. When people are like, okay, I have made it. Now you stay down there away from me. You'll make me dirty. It's very frustrating. But yeah, that's a good topic that I will definitely have a lot of opinions on, a lot of personal connections with. Let's see. Could you do John Talks Life of Michael Collins? If I were to do one on Michael Collins, well, if I were to do one about the life of Michael Collins, I would do a Many Man Does History. So the way, in my own mind, the way that I kind of work it, if it's very much story based, it'll be a Many Man Does History video, where it's me telling the story of something in history, or might even bring it beyond history at some point as well. But that's the kind of core of that. Whereas John Talks, there's a wee bit more analysis, a wee bit more opinion, a lot more opinion, and it's me talking to camera a lot more with the illustrations coming in. But if I were to do a John Talks about Michael Collins, it would be more so say, why Michael Collins was right in the Irish Civil War. Oh, I could do that for next year, seeing as next year will be the centenary of the outbreak of the Irish Civil War, and it will indeed be the centenary of several deaths. But it will be in August next year. Will be the centenary of the death of Michael Collins, and I just think it's one of those moments. I've spoken about this before in the live stream, so I'll not bore you too much. But I see the same thing with the death of Tecumseh during the War of 1812. Of these great go-betweens, these great people who they were able to, or not just Tecumseh, but also Sir Isaac Brock. Was he Sir? It was definitely Isaac Brock anyway. These great go-betweens who seemed to be able to work with both sides and go, right, there's a common interest here that we can find, and if we can find that and we can work together, because we're better off working together than at each other's throats. And Michael Collins was that person in Ireland, in my opinion. He was the connection. I mean, yeah, it was ultimately, anti-treaty forces that killed him, but I'd say there were many anti-treaty folks who, despite their staunchness on their position, they knew Michael Collins, and he was the type of guy who's going, look, if it were up to me, I wouldn't be doing any of this, but this is the way we're at it, and this is the decision that I made. So yeah, it's just one of those deep tragedies in Irish history, because I mean, as bad as the Civil War was leading up to the death of Collins, it just took a real cold turn. It took a real harshness. It took a real bitterness. There were a lot of grudges being settled. It was really brutal. It was really personal, right, let's see. JJ14, John, are you going to do other videos of other kingdoms of other monarchies when you finish all the monarchies of England? It's okay if you don't want to do it. Probably, yeah. It would need to be something it would need to be something that stimulates me, that I find interesting, and yeah, and maybe the French, but it's just like Then it was Louis, then it was Louis, then it was Louis, then it was Philip, then it was Louis again, then it was Louis again, then it was Louis again. Oh, do we have another Philip? Yeah, then it was Louis, then it was Louis, then it was Louis. And then there was no king. And then there was Louis again for a while. But yeah, so yeah. I mean, I find the story and I suppose my base layer of knowledge is so much more richer within English history and in relation to Irish history as well. That the English monarchs have just always been a kind of point of fascination for me. And I think globally as well, and I hate to say this, but globally, I think there is a bigger kind of market of interest for that. And that's something, unfortunately, that I do also have to take into consideration when I'm making these videos, because if I don't think it's going to, if it's something that I'm deeply passionate about, I'll probably make it anyway. If it's something that I'm just not sure will get the viewership, unless at a later date, when if you really want to kind of help along with that process, if you want to support on Patreon, you can, because that's one of the things at the moment where I am still kind of at the mercy of the algorithm. I am still at the mercy of will this gain traction on YouTube? Whereas if I had a bit more independence via Patreon, where I have a steady support through Patreon, I'd be able to kind of drive that a lot more, and I'd hopefully be able to have a much better community on Patreon as well, where my people on Patreon are awesome, don't get me wrong, but the more people they are, the more discussions we can have, and the more feedback that I can get with regards, what videos we want next. Let's see. Emmanuel Butler, hey John, could you do more history about African countries, especially related to American slavery? Yeah, no, that would definitely be of interest. You see, this is the thing. It is also, I mean, it's a lot of people's blind spot, and it is certainly a massive blind spot for me, is, because of such a Western centric narrative, such a Western centric. I mean, like, I live in Ireland, so my outlook, is, you start in your yard, and then you kind of you broaden your horizons, and you broaden your knowledge. So, like, my knowledge of Irish history is really good. My knowledge of English history is really good. My knowledge then of mainland Europe history is good, and then and my knowledge of American history as well is really good. And then you start kind of going, and this is the thing, is, you do fall victim to a lot of those kind of ideas of, and you don't do it intentionally, but it's just something that your mind does. But there is that tendency of, like, just kind of thinking Africa, and just Africa. It's like, Africa's a huge continent. It's massive, and like, just the diversity of people, the diversity of cultures, the diversity of language, the diversity of history. It would require me, not that I'm unwilling to do it, but it would require me to do a lot of research to really appreciate that, and to really appreciate the nuance in wherever, and to not, I'm not, it's not so much going, oh, that would be too much work for me to do. It's more so that in order for me to do it right and to do it properly, it would require a lot of work, which I would insist on myself to do. But yeah, no, it is definitely something. But this is something as well, though, is, like, why does it have to be in relation to the slave trade? Like, but unfortunately, that is such a common narrative with Africa, is of subjugation of, like, literally, you look at a map of Africa in the 1890s, and there's, you know, and there's two corners that weren't conquered by Europe, one being Ethiopia and the other being Liberia. And Liberia was essentially a colony set up by by the United States to send former enslaved people to go back to Africa. You know, because freed black people was too confusing for enslaved black people. It's almost as if you secretly knew what you were doing was wrong. And what else? Oh yeah, and then Ethiopia was ultimately then conquered by fascist Italy in the 1930s. But yeah, so Africa has a long and troubled history. I mean, you know, this is where we came from. Like, it's where humanity came from. Like, this is the thing too. You know, it's like somewhere down, was it Uganda or Central Africa? Was it? Somewhere down there. That is where Homo sapiens came from. I have this theory with regards the Great Flood, that, you know, because the Great Flood is a story that is present in so many mythologies all around the world. I have a theory that there was a Great Flood that happened really early in human experience, and this flood came and it killed almost all of humanity. But I think possibly this was when all of humanity was like 200 people, you know, like the entire community of Homo sapiens was 200 people. So like that would be, and you know, the water covered as far as the eye could see, and that was the experience of early humans was, and almost all of humanity was killed. And so that story was told and told and told. Oh, grandfather, tell us the story of the flood. Oh, wait till I tell you about the story of the flood. This is a good one. And it just got passed on and on and on. I always love those ideas of where elements of mythology maybe really happened in some shape or form. Like, you know, the whole story of the Trojan War, of how it's the last moment of Greek mythology and the first moment of Greek history, and indeed Turkish history. I mean, Troy was in Turkey, or what is now Turkey. But I'm fascinated by that thought as well, that there is a truth to that whole story, and how much of it, what, you know, like there probably was an Achilles, there probably was all of these figures in this story, and it's so fascinating, and I love those ideas. There's this excellent TikToker. Oh, what's her name? She's been doing an analysis on Gilgamesh, and she was hang on, and I need to get her name for you because she's really cool. I just can't think. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Well, she should probably just pop up on my feed. Of course, now is the time when my feed decides to not scroll through. Why are you doing this to me? What? Of all the times. Ah, okay. It was because it was plugged in. She should pop up on my feed. I mean, I could go and... Of course. Typical. She's not popping up on my feed now. Oh, is that her? Yes. There we go. Astrid Lundberg. At Odd Pride on TikTok, and she was talking about how, you know, so for anyone who doesn't know, the Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest piece of literature. It's the oldest story ever written down, and she talks about how like there's these like just one-off references to, oh yeah, and then he fought like this dragon snake thing, oh, and then he fought, and these creatures is just like, oh yeah, that was a thing, but those creatures only exist in that one passage in that one story and are not in anything else. And it's just this idea of, there was a point where that was a thing, it was like fetch, it happened. Well, actually, fetch never happened. Stop trying to make it happen. It's not going to happen. But like it's just so fascinating. Just this idea that there's so much of human memory that is lost and is not recoverable, which is just fascinating, but it's cool. It's cool. Right, let's see. Français Monarchist is asking, are you a monarchist? No, not really. I wouldn't necessarily call myself like hardcore anti-monarchist, but I'm not like, I think there are some folks in Ireland who are secretly kind of pro-monarchist, but and also given my national history of actively trying to break away from the monarchy for centuries, I think it's kind of in my blood where I'm like, no. But I mean, again, I'm biased because this is the way that we do it in Ireland, but I like the idea of our president, and it's not like the American president. The Irish president essentially acts as a monarch, or at least the way that the monarch works in the UK, for example, where Queen Elizabeth is, she's the head of state, but not head of government. And that's the same with the Irish president, that they are the head of state. They're essentially, the number one citizen, and they sign off on the kind of, on the final bills of what's the words, laws and stuff. But the major difference is we vote them out, or we vote them in for a 7-year term, and they can potentially be in there for 14 years, but then they're done. And that's that. Our current president, Michael D. Higgins, is a wonderful representation of Ireland. I mean, he's not perfect, but nobody is. Nobody is perfect. You're always going to find flaws in people. But yeah, I really like Michael D. Higgins, and I like his. But I love that, like what I love. Stephen Fry spoke about this with regards why he likes the monarchy, and why he thinks that America should have something like that, because the way that he puts it is that it gives the head of government, gives the prime minister a real sense of what's the word, humility, where they are, even though the monarch isn't completely the supreme power, but there is still just that kind of thing of the prime minister is answerable to the monarch. And so, like, Stephen Fry was kind of suggesting that, like, if you imagine that the president of the United States has to every day go in and speak to Uncle Sam, and say, so this is what has been happening in your country, and this is what we're doing about it, and this is what we're not doing about it, and I hope that's okay with you, but if it is, it is, and if it's not, it's not. Just this whole idea of kind of commander in chief and the top of the top of the top of the top. It's not perfect, and that's something that I think sometimes America, or at least kind of American conservatism, can really, really fall short on, is just this thing of, well, that's the way the founding fathers did it. And it's like, the founding fathers also didn't drive cars because they didn't exist yet. Like, like just this. But the thing is, it's such a um it's such a hypocrisy, because it's like the Bible, where it's like, well, the Bible says this, like, well, the Bible also says that. The Bible says condemn this. The Bible also says judge not lest ye be judged. Oh, but we're going to pick that one because that one allows us to do what we want to do, and that one doesn't. So we're going to pick that one. So that hypocrisy really annoys me, and I know I'm guilty of hypocrisy at times too. Everybody is. Nobody's perfect. But yeah. I've lost my train of thought now. But yeah, will the United Kingdom be a republic? I don't know. I certainly would imagine a reduction of the royals, perhaps, at some stage. I think because I don't know. I think William might bring a certain modernity to it. I mean, obviously, there's Charles to go first, and Charles too has certain kind of modern ideas. But Charles is like sad for Charles, but geez, I wouldn't be surprised if he pops the clogs before the Queen does. If she is anything to go by her mother, like her mother went till she was, I think, 101. But that was because that's happened a couple of times, and I think that happened Henry II, was it? I think Henry II, his son who was first in line, he died. Henry VIII's son, or no, Henry VIII's brother. So Henry VII's son, Arthur. That was the thing. That was how close the United Kingdom was to having it. Well, it wasn't the United Kingdom at that point. But they were so close to having a King Arthur. Was the Tudors. Because Arthur was married to what's her name? Catherine of Aragon. And then Arthur died. But they were so close to having a King Arthur. And then they didn't. I think there was another one. There's the Black Prince. He was the guy in A Knight's Tale. Oh my God. I watched A Knight's Tale, the Heath Ledger movie from like 2001 or 2. And I loved it. I was raging that 14-year-old me held myself back from watching it and from enjoying it. But my wife showed it to me, and I lapped it up. I just loved it, because she's watched several historical films with me, and she knows when I'm sitting there going, well, that armor didn't exist for another 200 years and all of that kind of stuff. But when a film knows what it is, and sometimes you'll have films which are going in pretending like they're historically accurate, or pretending like this is what it looked like, and it's like, no, it's not, and that's completely wrong, and that helmet didn't exist for another couple of centuries. But A Knight's Tale, literally, it sets its own rules, and it says, look, we're going to play, we'll open with We Will Rock You. This is the kind of movie that it is. I loved it. It's so good. But yeah, the dude in that who was the prince, the Black Prince, I can't remember whose son he was, but whoever he was, he died before his father as well. So the Black Prince, he never actually became king. But it was funny because I was reading up about him afterwards, and the tales of his chivalry were renowned and stuff. So that was really interesting, that of all movies there was actually a really interesting kind of historical shade to it. I mean, even like a lot of the costume, a lot of the armor and stuff, I didn't have too many problems with. Like, there was this and that. The major thing that I didn't like was the girl, I can't remember her name, but the princess, I didn't like her outfit at all. Like, because it felt everything else was trying to be medieval, and hers was just designed by Ralph Lauren, or designed by who was it? Did Fifth Element? Oh, Who designed the Fifth Element? It was like big fashion designer. Designed the costumes for Fifth Element. Fifth Element. French fashion. I think it was a French production, or it was a French. Yeah. Le cinquième élément. Jean-Paul Gaultier. I knew it was some big fashion designer designed the costumes, and when you watch that film, you realize. So let's see. I'm going to take 3 more questions, and then we'll finish it up for today. This has been lovely spending time with these folks. John talks about the Uyghur internment camps. Absolutely. Thank you, Rusty Shackleford, for that. Yeah, that is something that I'm not going to talk too much more on at the moment because, full disclosure, I don't know enough about it off the top of my head. I saw the report that John Oliver did on it too long ago now for nothing to have been done about it. But yeah, no, that's definitely something that I should do sooner rather than later. There's not going to be too many illustrations in that one because I usually only, the illustrations for the John Talks ones are illustrations that I already have done. And that's a corner of the world and a corner of history that I don't have too much illustration for at all. But still, it's something that needs doing and needs talking about. Who am I to talk about it? But as long as people are talking about it, and you're right, not enough people are talking about it. Let's see. Dolut is asking, are you interested in making videos on other subjects, perhaps like the rise of political ideologies, for example, might go well with your style? Maybe you could link it to parties in common in Ireland. Yeah. So kind of broader things rather than a very specific point in history. The reason why I tend to go for those kind of specific things in history is because I like the storytelling aspect of it. I like the story structure of it. That I like it when something has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And certain things, wars in particular, kind of tend to have a decent structure for that. This is when the war, the lead up to the war, the outbreak of the war, the development of the war, generally the climax of the war, and the outcome, so they're very tidy stories to be able to tell. And I suppose that's probably one of the problems that I'm finding. I suppose the script's already written, but still it was the problem that I found with the civil rights movement, for example, was where do you start, where do you stop? And so, I'm essentially part 2 is going to go from 1955 to 1968, but with an extended epilogue of going, it didn't end in 1968, the problems didn't end in 1968. So, but yeah, so broader topics, would be, and I think the John Talks, what's the word format probably would suit that better, because the nice thing about the John Talks ones is they're quicker to make, which means more content for you, but also it means that I can, while I'm working on because the Manny Man videos, they're actually taking longer and longer to make because I'm becoming more and more of a perfectionist in the way that I do them. But they take at least a month to produce, at least a month. You're like, but John, you haven't released one since the United States. Well, I've been moving house and moving office. But yeah. So the Manny Man ones, they take a while to produce. But the John Talks, they can potentially take like a day or 2 to make. Depends on how much research I need to do. But, I write the script, and I record the script, and I edit the script, and that's it. You're sitting there going, John, that's literally what almost every other YouTuber has been doing for the last couple of years. I'm like, I know. Like the more I'm editing these the John talks, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh wow, I'm finally feeling like a proper YouTuber." Oh dear. Like it's funny. Like a lot of my favorite YouTubers, like some philosophy tube, and Abigail posted up about how she's been making videos now for 8 years, and I'm sitting there going, I have been making videos for the same amount of time, and part of me wonders sometimes, did I hold myself back with the animated format, or with it not reaching out, or not collaborating with more people? I mean, because realistically, because I look at channels like Oversimplified, which do similar animated history content to myself, and I look at that stuff, and I often wonder, like, could that have been me? Because I started before Oversimplified did, and I look at the success of Oversimplified, and and then this is something that you can't help but do sometimes, and I just look at that and I wonder, could I, in an alternate timeline where I went digital earlier, or started collaborating with other people, like started working, having an animation team, so that I could concentrate on other aspects of the writing or of the production, could the channel have been bigger by now? The existential questions of being a YouTuber for your viewing pleasure here live on YouTube. But seriously though, it's something I always think about. But yeah. So let's see. Spencer, I mean, Abigail has massive production hurdles too, I think, with all the costumes and sets, etc. Yes, she does, absolutely. But the major difference is she now has, and again, this isn't to make excuses for me or anything, but like, looking at the big productions that, say, the likes of her, the likes of Natalie Wynn and ContraPoints, the likes of H Bomber Guy, who seem to take ages to make videos, and but on the back of that, they also have a solid Patreon support mechanism, and they put that back into their videos, but they have the ability to do that, and fair play to them too. Like, this is not a diss. This is a I wish I could do that. This is, I wish I could pay a color artist to color all of my things. That is something, again, I'm still toying with, but trying to work out ways that I can make the production of the Manny Man videos quicker. And one of those compromises was doing the John talks on top of it, so at least I can, you can have more content from me, and I can chat to you more, and also one of the nice things about, and one of the reasons why I chose to be a creative person years and years ago was self-expression, and to be able to express myself. And if it is a simple opinion piece, happy days, because like, sometimes I'll have certain things where I'm like, I really want to do this, or I really want to tell this, and I don't have a big enough Twitter following to shout out there. So I'm like, I'm going to make a YouTube video, because that's where my biggest audience is. So yeah, it's fun. Right, one more. Ireland and Portugal had a lot in common. They used to be under control, their neighborhood country, United Kingdom and Spain. In the 16th century, Portugal was under control of Spain. In the 21st century, Ireland was under control of the United Kingdom. I'm slightly confused by that. Plus, Portugal was also a bit of an imperialist power at one point. They owned, they controlled Brazil, but they also kind of controlled a lot of ports along the African coast. Their brand of kind of imperialism wasn't so much let's conquer the whole country, but let's conquer the ports. And apparently, they were, they weren't the best of quote unquote masters, shall we say? But who was? But let's see. JJ14 asks, is Ireland a great country, John? Yeah, I think it is. You'll always say that. It's not without its faults. I really like Ireland, for what it is out of the control of people. Its climate is, it's not amazing. There's a lot of rain, but because of that, there's a lot of green. The winters are not too cold. The summers are not too hot. The hottest it has ever been recorded in Ireland since records began is like 33 degrees Celsius. And I don't know what that is in baby Fahrenheit. It's not hot. I think somewhere like 90 degrees or not even, but it's around there, late 80s maybe. But yeah, it's not too hot, not too cold. Opportunities for people. One thing I love about Ireland is actually, funnily enough, how small it is, and not just geographically small. Like you can drive from one end of the country to the other in a day, and not even, like if you want to drive from Ireland's most northerly point to its most southerly point, you could do so in, I would say, 1, 3, 6, 7, maybe 8 hours drive. I'd imagine maybe 7 or 8 hours, Malin to Mizzen. And that's just an estimate off the top of my head. I'd say Google Maps will probably give you a different number. But yeah, it's a good country. But also one thing that I really like is how small it is, people-wise. That when it comes to working and when it comes to, like, say, the creative industry here, it's a much smaller community. And so, like, you do have you do have great potential of working with the tops of the industry in Ireland relatively quickly. If you do the right things, or if you work in the right ways, or if you whereas say if you're even in London, or in England, because England is a slightly bigger country geographically than Ireland, but population wise it's immense. The population of Ireland is like about 5 million, or 6.5 million, I think, if you count the north. But like it's not huge. So there is this kind of, it's both a blessing and a curse, where you're kind of only really 1 degree of separation from anyone in Ireland. Like if you meet someone, if you chat for long enough, you'll probably be able to find a person in common. I remember trying to prove this point when I was down in Cork, down in the opposite end of the country, and I was explaining this to someone. They were from Germany, and I was explaining this to them. And so I was like, right, watch this. Went over and started talking with some random guy in the bar. And I was like, hey, how's it going? What do you do for a living? Is it, oh, I'm a lighting technician. I was like, oh, so you probably know loads of lighting technicians around the country. And he was like, yeah, do you know Niall Cranny up in Letterkenny? Oh, yeah, I know. I was like, there you go. There you go. So it is indeed a small world, and indeed a small island. That is Ireland. Okay, I'll do one more. Oh, what a great one to finish out on. So Keen's Piggies is asking, John, could you do alternate history one day? Possibly. One thing that I have been kind of considering doing for the laugh is like doing like a Many Man Does History, but with alternate history, but like fictionalized history. I love alternate history. I started watching Man in the High Castle. Didn't get too far into it yet, but I must get back to it. I enjoyed it, but yeah, I love alternate histories. You know, regardless of whether or not kind of they're accurate or not. I just love that whole idea of what if, what if this happened, or what if the Nazis won, what if, because it is just that pure butterfly effect of, well, then this wouldn't have happened, and this wouldn't have happened, and this wouldn't have happened. Like I love that one of I just watched the Danny Boyle film there again yesterday. Yesterday was what I watched. But yeah, I love that idea of someone just reinventing something that already exists, but only in their mind. And that's, the complete works of the Beatles. Nobody remembers it. Although, like, that technically would have caused a massive kind of butterfly effect in the world of, if the Beatles didn't exist, then all of the musicians that were influenced by them, so. But that film doesn't really consider that. The one thing that really annoys me about that film, though, is the ending that they decided to change. Now, these minor spoilers, but at the end of the film, the main character, who up until this point has been one of the only people to be able to remember the works of the Beatles, and the existence of Coca-Cola and the existence of cigarettes, he is sitting at the window and he thinks, wow, I feel like Harry Potter at the end of his journey. Kind of Spencer O'Dowd, thank you very much for that super chat, by the way. Hit me up. I've got an alternate timeline in the works. Well, get in touch on Twitter or somewhere like that. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, but Twitter would be a good place to chat about that if you want to hit me up. So yeah, where he at the end he says, "Wow, I feel like Harry Potter, having just defeated Voldemort and just the brave new world at the end of the day." And then his friend, she's like, "Who's Harry Potter?" And he's like, "Oh, never mind." Originally, it was supposed to be her, and they shot it. It was her who says that line. So the whole movie, he's the one who was sitting on the gold mine of knowing all the Beatles songs. But then at the end, it's her who is potentially sitting on the gold mine of knowing the plot lines of the whole the Harry Potter series. And like it's such a better ending. I don't understand why they changed it, like why they made it him. Like, I don't know, were they worried that the audience would be like, oh, but it was him who was hit by the bus and not her. But I mean, I don't care. She's the much better. Anyway, and I think him getting hit by the bus was more of a coincidence than anything, because there was just that blackout. Oh, maybe that's why he wasn't affected by that blackout. But still, this is a film that doesn't really care too much about rules. And for the sake of being a much, much better punchline at the end, she's the one who's sitting there going, wow, you must feel like Harry Potter at the end of the story, having defeated Voldemort. And he is in there. Who's Harry Potter? Why? Why such a missed opportunity? But anyway, imagine Ireland had a colony in the Americas, John. Well, yeah, I mean, Ireland ended up kind of populating. I wouldn't necessarily say colonizing, but I suppose no official colonies anyway, but they certainly populated a lot of the world. But yeah, this has been fun, folks, and I look forward to doing more. Let me just double check over on over on the live stream, or over on the Patreon, because we have guaranteed questions being asked. So I'll just make sure that if anyone asked any questions over on the Patreon, if anyone would like to support me on Patreon, you can do so at patreon.com/John D. Ruddy. You can pledge as low as €1 per month, if that's all you can afford. And what that does is it helps me be able to concentrate on this kind of work, on the YouTube, on the video production, because otherwise I have to take on other jobs to make sure that I can pay the bills. So like I do map illustrations for groups in Dublin. Not that I love that work too, but if you would like to incentivize me to concentrate on this, then you can do so. That is one way that you can support, and also you can support me. Thank you so much, folks, for the super chats during this live stream as well. But for now, I will leave you to it, and I hope you all have a lovely weekend. And I'll chat to you in July, and hopefully I will have my Civil Rights Part 2 video done by then. No guarantees, but we'll see. It'll be done when it's done. See you later.